It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and this is a tale not of two cities, but of two skin-tight polyester jumpsuits. In the before COVID times, the work party night was a fixture of my December calendar, and I've probably been to about 20 of the things over the years, and there's a predictable pattern. At 6:30, the taxi beeps outside, and I squeeze in beside my work friends, the air heavy with competing perfumes and the pre-game Prosecco. And I love to see our nurses and admin staff out of their blue uniforms in their sequins and their heels all gorgeous and glittery. And inside the hotel function room, crammed with other work groups, we're fed a school dinner style mass catered Christmas meal. We drink an unwise amount, and then we take to the dance floor wearing paper hats and boas made of tinsel until the minibuses and taxis take us home. And the wine on the table is marked red or white, which I suppose is accurate. And it's immediately heartburn-inducing stuff staining our teeth purple. But from experience, the best way to get through the evening is just to keep downing it, plunging deeply into the bottle like an Amish teenager on Rumspringa, because after the meal is over, the dancing starts, and it's best to have lost a few inhibitions by then. And of those 20 party nights, there are two which stand out, and weirdly, both involve skin-tight jumpsuits. The first was with the out-of-hours doctor's service in a hotel which seemed to be in the arse end of nowhere. And by the time the coach had twisted and turned round every housing estate in Country Road, my stomach was churning. And the food was what it always was: reheated turkey slices in gelatinous gravy, cold pre-frozen roast potatoes and soggy sprouts, and the table was long and cramped, the room noisy, and conversation meant getting close enough to my boss that I could count his ear hairs as I leant in. And after the lukewarm coffee was served, we were treated to a comedian so profoundly offensive that I longed for the awkward too close conversation. A room full of lefty liberal doctors was probably a tough crowd for his routine of mental health jokes, liberally sprinkled with misogyny, homophobia, and a side of racism. So I kept my eyes on my after-dinner mint wrapper, folding and unfolding it into tiny foil squares. But worse was to come, because next up was Scotland's #1 Freddie Mercury impersonator. And onto the tiny stage he strutted, much smaller than he'd looked on Stars in Their Eyes, his hair slicked back, his moustache immaculate, a yellow jacket over his white polyester jumpsuit. And he belted out hit after hit, prowling from table to table with his wireless mic, and I was uncomfortably close to the front. I reached for more wine, praying that he'd not head in my direction, but I was in prime position and he'd locked on to his next target. Deeply lunging so that his foot was on my table, he struck his classic Freddie power pose, chin to the ceiling, my head at crotch height. And I could see the outline of his white thong under the lycra. And if you want to know if he was circumcised or not, you can ask me in the chat. But I can tell you that his left ball hung significantly lower than the right, and the whole glorious vision was dripping with sweat. "Don't stop me now," he belted, spittle gently misting my face. If only I could have stopped him, because the bus trip and the greasy meal and the cheap wine was now all being replaced by the queasiness of a personal table dance by a small, intensely sweaty Scottish man. And what is the correct face to make under such circumstances? I aimed for a kind of serene neutrality, the face I make when looking at something horrendously oozy, when I don't want to let the patient know that I'm this close to vomiting. And eventually, he moved on to a more responsive table of postmenopausal ladies out for a girls' night who reacted as though the cast of Magic Mike had arrived to kickstart their ovaries. And I wiped his sweat off my shoulder with a paper napkin and drank some more cheap wine. And that was polyester jumpsuit #1. And the second was a few years later, when the medical practice I now worked at booked our annual party night, and this time the entertainment was an ABBA tribute act. Benny and Bjorn on the flyer, filling their jumpsuits like homemade sausages. And one of the doctor team decided that as there were 2 male doctors and 2 female, it would be fun to prank the rest of the staff by turning up in our own ABBA outfits. And when we laughingly ordered the costumes in June, it had been hilarious, but now as the evening drew closer, I was having some doubts. Now to put you in the picture, Neil, Paul and Helen are the stereotype of the health-conscious doctor, marathon-running, road biking, Ironman, competing freaks of self-discipline with 2% body fat and the confidence that goes with it. And I, on the other hand, am not. And at the time, I was a few months back from maternity leave on the lumpier side of things and with the body confidence of a bullied teenager. So, to illustrate one of my first encounters at the health centre as the brand new doctor went a bit like this. Patient, oh, how fantastic, a fat doctor. They're all so bloody skinny in here. Me, thanks. I'm glad I've made you feel comfortable. That patient's flu jab needle got an extra wee wiggle that year. I'm only joking, sort of. So when the other 3 arrived to collect me, I was standing in my made in China silver jumpsuit in front of the hall mirror, trying in vain to convince myself that I could leave the house looking like a foil wrapped burrito. And I'd had half a bottle of Prosecco while getting ready and was waiting for the alcohol haze to take me out of my body. It did not. Arriving at the hotel, I realised that getting out of the house had been the easy bit, and heading for the entrance, with the other 3 looking frankly pretty damn sexy, I felt as though I was in one of those anxiety dreams where you're fully nude in a room full of people. There was no waking up. And just inside the door, our whole practice team waited. Time slowed as they took in our strange tribute to the tribute act, a mixture of horror and pity soon replaced by laughter, and not just by our little group, but all the other party goers around the room, nudging one another and pointing. So I kept drinking, and so did we all. And eventually, as the tribute act took to the stage, we became the centre of attention on the dance floor. The boys had to pair up to go to the bathroom, as running the gauntlet through a crowd of disinhibited middle-aged ladies became a serious health hazard. I'm sure they had questions to answer the next morning when their wives spotted the scattering of bruises on their toned bums from all the pinching. No one pinched my bum, which I was a little offended by, but slowly the embarrassment faded or the wine took over. And there were a few advantages. People kept sending us drinks, which was nice. And when I spilled my turkey and gravy down my front, silver polyester is surprisingly white clean. And the zip made for easy access when I needed a wee, no layers of Spanx or tights to navigate under the party dress. And we even got a wave and a cheer from the real ABBA on stage. And those 2 nights might have felt like some of the worst of times, but now in this endless COVID hellscape, I find myself longing for silly nights out with messy, tipsy friends. And I find myself nostalgic for uncomfortable outfits and the warmth of those oversharing, heartfelt, top volume conversations in the ladies. And I miss remembering that after a bottle or 2 of cheap red wine, we're all dancing queens deep down. And the fact that if we're ever on a night out together, it's a guarantee that at some point I'm going to cup your face in my hands and tell you that I love you. You've been warned. And I hope that someday soon we'll be singing Mariah Carey on a minibus back home and getting the driver to stop for chips, and then walking to the front door, dangling my heels in one hand, and remembering too late that our driveway's gravel, and then texting the group chat to remind everyone to have a pint of water and ibuprofen before getting into bed. So maybe in the end, those really were the best of times. And in fact, I wonder if that Freddie Mercury guy's got any gigs in 2022. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, Gyda, I can't wait for you to cup my face and give me a big kiss and tell me how much you love me.
Anytime.